Kido is one of the 4 Shinigami fighting styles, based on advanced spells which are produced with strong Ryatsu and fall into 2 categories: Hado as destructive direct attacks, and Bakudo, generally as binding and battle support spells. Kido's spells are triggered with incantations, which I'm sure Kubo had a lot of fun creating them, as his series is littered with subtle poetry. Experienced Kido practitioners can perform them without an incantation, though the effectiveness of the spell may be diminished. There is even a branch of Soul Society's military which excels in the mastery of Kido, that being the Kido Corps, which is criminally underused in my opinion. Most spells are graded on a scale from 1 to 99. As you can probably guess, the latter spells get progressively stronger and difficult to use. An experienced Shinigami must recite the specific incantation for the spell to work, and it takes a considerable amount of time to recite it, which can be a disadvantage in the heat of battle. Also, the power of the spell relies on the power of the user, as even a lower level spell can be utterly devastating when utilized by a high-class Shinigami. Kido can be used for practical purposes as well, like in chapter 248, when Henji used it to light a dark hallway. No Kido lasts forever. Baragon demonstrates this with his time-accelerating technique, corroding a barrier cage in chapter 368. Within the Kido classification, there are 3 types of Kido: binding spells, destruction spells, and healing spells. Some examples of Hado and Bakudo are barriers, which functions by focusing one's spiritual pressure into a solid form of energy. It can take on many shapes and colors at the user's intent. Barriers are defensive in nature, but can also be used as some sort of containment. Some types of barriers can mask the user's spiritual pressure or even hide them completely, both physically and spiritually. Weak barriers can be easily broken, while strong ones can last centuries. In Soul Society, it is believed that barriers created by noble blood are indestructible by those of lower status. There are also seals which are somewhat similar to barriers, albeit far more powerful and require much more preparation to use. Sealments are meant to hold the most powerful and dangerous artifacts and beings, and are usually hard to break. There is even an extension of the Hado called Jisei Hado, or Sacrificial Way of Destruction in English. The name is pretty self-explanatory, as it requires the user to sacrifice a certain portion of themselves in order to perform it. We first saw this in the Fake Karakura Town arc, when Yamamoto sacrifices his left arm to use Hado 96 Hitokazu against Aizen in chapter 395. And as I mentioned earlier, there are healing Kido, which differently from graded Kido, they do not possess known names, numbers, or incantations to cast, and activates by leaning one's hands over the patient's wounds. The proceedings to use a healing Kido is that first, the healer will perform a Ryatsu restoration. This allows the patient to recover his body using his or her own Ryatsu, and the healer's external Ryatsu, restoring the spiritual power. When the physical body is in a fully healed state, there is no difficulty at all. The form of spells considered illegal by Soul Society are those involving the manipulation of space and time, like Hado 90 Kurohitsugi used by Aizen. Kido spells can also be handled simultaneously. This is called Nijueishu, or two-fold incantation. This is a type of Kido one might use to get a tactical advantage or to confuse their opponent, like when Rukia used a restraining spell on Aroniero to get him to stand in Sunlight's way. Once she wrecked the wall behind him with a subsequent spell. Eisho Haki, or incantation abandonment, is the aforementioned act of not uttering the spell before casting it. Any Shinigami with rudimentary knowledge can use this technique, but it's more effective when executed by a skilled practitioner, otherwise the spell could utterly fail. Kojutsu Eishu, or spoken after incantation, is a rather rare Kido in which the incantation is recited after initiating the spell to power it up, and so far we've only seen Hachi using this technique in order to bolster the capabilities of his Ryubi no Jamon during his fight against Baragan. Kido users who possesses basic knowledge can use low to mid-level Kido and often have trouble using spells at higher levels. Some examples of such users are Renji Abarai, Jin Ichimaru, and Shinji Hiraku. Kido experts have considerable knowledge of its its various forms, being able to use mid-level spells to great effect, even without incantation. Such users include Kanami Tosen, Rukia Kuchiki, and Izuru Kira, and finally Kido Masters, Sousuke Aizen, Hetsu, or Yachiru Unohana, as you prefer, and Tesai Tsukabishi are amongst such users, being proficient enough to use high-level spells and even create their own spells or modify existing ones to suit their own purposes. That's it for this video, guys. I'm a huge Bleach fan, and 2022 is a great year for Bleach. If you enjoyed this video, please support my channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more Bleach content just like this. And with this quote, I end this video. People can possess hope because their eyes are unable to see death.